Chris Foy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It is a genuine pleasure to speak to the Radio New Zealand Amendment Bill, and I want to acknowledge the Speaker who's just made a contribution, the Chair of the Commerce Select Committee, who, as she pointed out herself, was a broadcaster, and I think importantly a broadcaster who was making her own programs and in that creative space. So she does know what she's talking about when we're talking about the broadcasting industry at large. I also want to acknowledge the people who work for Radio New Zealand. I think given, and it has been mentioned on this side of the House, the financial constraints that they are under and the digital change that the whole industry is under, that they have responded to those digital changes and the financial challenges that they're under in a very effective way. But I think it could have been better. That kind of speaks to our disappointment about the passage of this bill. I think if you look at the details of the bill itself and the functions of this bill, you have to say it's a good bill because it puts in legislation the charter for Radio New Zealand and it enshrines some very important things for me as a former broadcaster and who spent most of his time in public broadcaster. Radio New Zealand, by law, has to deliver its services of the highest quality to inform, entertain and enlighten people of New Zealand, challenge, innovate and engage their listeners, foster crucial thought and informed and wide-ranging debate. And as a citizen and as a former broadcaster, I think those functions are very good functions and ones that hopefully we all support. But unfortunately, the last words in this piece of legislation tell a sorry story of the journey of this bill. And Melissa Lee pointed that out in her contribution, that this piece of legislation was introduced on the 2nd of June 2009. And we're here, and there is a degree of hypocrisy here of myself, because we are speaking to it, and it's taken so long, and there have been so many delays, but I think it's important that we point this out. I don't want to overly prolong this debate. I want this piece of legislation to pass. But I think it is important that we do point out that in 2009 this piece of legislation came out. In June of that year, the Select Committee reported back in December of that year, and it's taken us 6 years, as Melissa Lee pointed out herself, for this piece of legislation to pass. And I think that speaks to the priority that this government has put on public broadcasting. And I think, the 6-year wait shows that it's a low priority. And dangerous not only about some of the functions that I spoke about that are enshrined for Radio New Zealand, but also dangerous because of the quickly changing nature of the media. And if we want Radio New Zealand, which I think is our shining light of public broadcasting, to be just as good as the ever-changing market with NZME, with Fairfax, with our other public broadcaster TVNZ and other media outlets in New Zealand, we have to support our radio public broadcaster to make sure it can change with the times and ensure that the high quality standards that we expect and that it delivers can be delivered as well. Minister Lee spoke about the convergence, that radio is no longer radio alone. And I believe on air at the moment is Checkpoint. And it's not just radio alone now. John Campbell, who after leaving MediaWorks now does his show online. You can watch him do his show. And that's why I want to congratulate Radio New Zealand for branching out into that area. But I think the constraints, the financial constraints that this government has put on Radio New Zealand is restricting Radio New Zealand's ability to do more. And if we want our public broadcaster to do more, to challenge, to inform, to have those debates that the Charter talks about and keep that quality, it also needs to be at the forefront of technological changes. And I think that the commitment over those 6 years, or lack of commitment over that 6 years, has seriously hamstrung Radio New Zealand. And I think you just need to look to Television New Zealand and what the current government has done there as well. Removing TVNZ 6 and TVNZ 7, again shows a lack of commitment to public broadcasting. I don't know why, because I think it's an important thing for our nation to have scrutiny. Unbiased, scrutiny with integrity, and I think that comes from a public broadcaster. So when we look at this piece of legislation, the functions are great, the journey is awful. 6 years is too long to wait for this piece of legislation to pass through this House. A freezing fund since 2009 to keep it just under $32 million for Radio New Zealand is not good enough for what I would hope we are as a good functioning democracy.
Order. Order. This debate is interrupted and set down for resumption next sitting day. It now gives me pleasure to be part of a historic process, and the House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. on Tuesday, the 29th of March 2016.